What you know, alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It is Monday, April 7th. We had openings in the Lori Daybell trial. Also, first few witnesses on the stand. Let's break it down. There was a little bit of an issue at first with Brandon Boudreaux, who was in the courtroom today. As you guys know, his trial is coming up shortly after Charles's trial concludes, and Lori wants to call him as a witness. The judge asked Lori what's the relevance, and she said communication up to the date of Charles's murder. She said his testimony would revolve around the intervention that Brandon was going to participate in with Adam and Charles. Lori said without giving away her defense, she wants to include some emails and text messages as part of his testimony. Brandon was briefly sent out, but he was allowed to come back in. As of right now, he is not on the witness list, but later on, if that door opens, he could be put back on there. A juror was also released due to financial hardship, so we are already down one alternate before we even get started. But let's jump into openings. A lot of this stuff we covered on the backstory. The state starts with the text message Lori sent to Alex. So I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple of days. Mel can't go. Lots to do. Thanks for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. Lori wrote this to her brother Alex 2 days before he killed her husband. In July of 2019, Lori was married to Charles. He lived in Texas and she was in Arizona. But she wanted to be Lori Daybell, and she could if Charles was dead. She wanted to keep the same lifestyle she had with Charles. She would get $1 million of his life insurance policy and $4,000 for Social Security. Lori, Chad, and Alex believed in evil spirits and zombies, and they used religion and Nephi's story, who was directed by the Holy Spirit to kill Laban. Lori used that as justification to kill Charles. On July 11th, 2019, Lori invoked Nephi. If you disagreed with Lori, Alex, and Chad, you were deemed a dark spirit. In 2018, Lori met Chad. In November 2018, Chad came to Arizona for a Preparing a People conference and then stayed at Lori and Charles's house. January 2019, Lori claims Charles was possessed by Ned Schneider. You'll see text messages where they talk about it, and Chad refers to Charles as Ned. You will meet these women who were initially part of this group, but the more they listened, the more they were concerned. You'll hear from Serena that in March 2019, she went to a women's conference, and Lori said that Charles was possessed and asked them to come try and cast out the evil spirit. In a text from Lori to Alex, March 26, 2019, Alex texts Lori, Ned is still alive, just confirmed. Lori, it's not Ned, it's a new one. No one has seen him, right? Just talk to him. Alex, his body is alive, right? Lori, still working, talk to you later. June 9th, 2019, Serena will testify Alex Cox attended their meeting and heard him say he just wanted to kill Charles. Lori would say in response she had been crushing up JJ's medications and putting those in Charles's protein shakes. Serena confronts Lori and said she would have to go to the police if something happened to Charles. They tell a bit of the backstory and say JJ was everything to Charles. And that was the reason Charles and Lori were still together. Charles told a lot of people about this. He changed his beneficiary to Kay, and Lori had no idea. Charles was close to Lori's brother Adam, and Adam will testify he's heard Lori say things outside the LDS religion. June 28th, Charles found out Lori and Chad were having an affair. Adam flew to Arizona to help with an intervention. Adam asked Alex if he could stay with him, and Alex said sure. But when he got there, Alex ghosted him. July 9th, Lori knew Charles was trying to have an intervention. She texted Alex that he would be like Nephi, and after that text, they talked on the phone for 56 minutes. July 10th, Charles went on a date with a woman named Nancy Joe, who he had met on an LDS dating site. They had been talking and texting on a regular basis, but after that first date, she never heard from him again. She found out on the news that Charles had been killed. On July 10th, Alex was at Lori's house and he brought guns, ammunition, and a garbage bag with clothes inside. He was prepared. July 10th, Charles texts Lori what time he would be there the next morning to get JJ. Lori and Alex knew exactly what time Charles would be there. The morning of July 11th, 2019, there were early morning texts between Chad and Lori, but those were not retrieved. But you will see the movements of Charles's phone that morning. At 7:35 a.m., Charles arrived at the house and texted Adam, "Al is here." That morning, Charles stands at the door of the house he rented for Lori, Tylee, and JJ. He walks in. Lori wanted to stop Charles from the intervention, so she took his phone and refused to give it back. She is why Alex was able to shoot Charles. Lori is why he is dead. The prosecutor goes on to describe the house, the living room. It was empty, no furniture, mirrors on the walls, and that is where Charles Vallow was shot. First to his chest, and it exits out the back, and he falls to the ground. He put his left hand, which is his dominant hand, to the wound, and blood transferred to his left hand. That shot went through his heart. The medical examiner will testify it takes up to 2 minutes to die, and in those 2 minutes, usually the victim can still talk and move. As Charles was on the floor, Alex fired a second shot that entered his abdomen and exited his left shoulder. That's nothing accidental about the second shot. The prosecutor talks about trajectory and says one of the projectiles ended up across the room in a baseboard. When investigators moved Charles, they found another bullet. And after moving Charles and wiping up the blood, they found a defect in the floor. 7:49 a.m., Lori leaves with Charles's cell phone in his rental car and went to Walgreens and spoke with her brother Alex twice at 7:52 and 8:06 a.m. At this point, 911 had not been called. In fact, Alex waited 47 minutes to call 911. And in that time, Alex staged the scene and made mistakes. Police have a bat from the scene. It fell and rolled towards a wall. But Alex forgot Charles was left-handed and the bat was on the wrong side of his body. She talks about Alex's head wound. There was no blood on the floor. There was no blood anywhere of Alex's after he was hit in the head. On body cam, you see Alex sit down, sometimes rubbing his head, and she mentions on the body cam that Alex's sunglasses were still on his head and even stayed on during the alleged struggle. And there was no damage to the mirrors. This was not self-defense. Alex staged the scene. Lori saw the shooting and then told police she left. But when Lori shows back up at the residence after the shooting, she doesn't ask, why are police and first responders here? And she doesn't ask why Alex is sitting on the curb. Lori says she was inside when the shot happened. Police tell her Charles is dead, but the prosecution said she knew because she was in there. Lori admitted to police that she took Charles's cell phone and Charles asked for it back. Lori said no. She admitted she was the reason Charles just didn't leave to take JJ to school. After Charles's murder, police were looking for Charles's cell phone in the house, but it wasn't there because Lori had Charles's phone. Lori and Alex went back to Alex's place and went through Charles's phone. Alex took photos off of Charles's phones, including Adam's flight plans, and he sent those to Lori. That is a new piece of information, I think. I don't believe I've ever heard that. Lori told law enforcement she found Charles's phone in the car, and she gave that back to law enforcement. Tylee provided the PIN number. And the next day, she texts Charles's adult sons, "Your dad is dead." Kay Woodcock found out on Google that her brother was dead. A few days later, Lori calls Banner Life Insurance to start the process to get the insurance money, but later learned she wasn't the beneficiary. No life insurance for Lori. The state mentions the text messages between Lori and Chad, where Lori says, I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. It was probably Ned before we got rid of him. She was angry and she went through Charles's computer and saw the beneficiary was Kay Woodcock. She then sent Kay an angry text. The evidence will show that Lori conspired with her brother to kill Charles Vallow to get the life insurance money. And that was it pretty much for the state opening. For Lori's openings, it was very interesting. It is very much Lori's version of events in her own head. So let's jump in. And I have to say, before every single sentence, she would say, the evidence will show I've been charged with serious crimes. Did I commit this crime? Conspiracy to commit murder is an agreement between two or more people. There has to be an agreement and a plan. The evidence will show Charles and I got married in 2006. He was my fourth marriage and I was his third. We each had 2 kids and we moved from Texas to Arizona in 2009. We adopted our great nephew, JJ, who was born in 2012. We were married over 13 years and raised 5 children. I was a cosmetologist and he was a licensed life insurance salesman. We bought life insurance early in our marriage and Charles maxed them out. He was 17 years older than me and had high blood pressure, so the max was $1 million, mine was $2 million. Throughout our 13-year marriage, we always had life insurance. Charles would always shop for who would give us the maximum amount. That was his business, and I helped him. In 2016, Charles purchased a $2 million policy on me, and he was the sole beneficiary. We had a happy marriage for 13 years. Yes, Charles was a baseball player, but he was a left-handed pitcher and a right-handed batter. In 2014, we moved to Kauai, Hawaii for 3.5 years and returned in 2017. Tylee was 3 years old when Charles and I got married. And as she grew into a teenager, the relationship was difficult and they had to go to therapy to stop the fighting. April of 2018, Tylee's dad dies of a heart attack. Charles called Social Security and made an appointment. There is an objection for hearsay that is sustained. We got Social Security for Tylee for her deceased dad until she would have turned 18. In January of 2019, Tylee and Charles fought more after we were separated. Several people saw the arguments that increased to physical in 2018. She names a bunch of months, February, March, claims they were captured on video, and she said the worst of it was in July of 2019. I don't buy this for 1 second. In March of 2019, Charles pulled JJ out of school in Arizona and moved to Texas. We reconciled and we moved to Texas. JJ was autistic and attended a special school in Arizona. And in June 2019, me, Tylee, and JJ moved back to Arizona to re-enroll him since he had no services in Texas. Me and Charles agreed on this and he rented me and the kids a house here in Chandler. Charles was in Texas. Between June and July, Charles sent me threatening text messages and insisted on flying into Phoenix on July 10th. I told him he couldn't stay with us because he and Tylee couldn't get along. So I booked him a room. Charles flew in on the 10th. He also paid to fly my brother into Arizona the same day. Charles planned to come to our home to take JJ to school. At 8:25 a.m., the school opens the gates, but Charles showed up around 7:30 in the rental car I rented for him. 2 things to remember here. Number 1, Lori stole all of the rental car points from Charles. And also, Charles had told a hotel employee where he was staying that he was bringing JJ back there for breakfast before he went to school. She goes on to say, Charles texted my brother Adam before entering the house. Alex and Tylee were asleep. Only JJ and I were up. Charles came in. He put JJ in the car and he came back in to get his phone. He screamed at me when I refused to give him his phone. His screaming woke up Alex and Tylee. Lori starts to get emotional and said Tylee and Charles struggled and Tylee fell. Charles lifted the bat to hit her, and I'm assuming she means Tylee here, although that's the first we've ever heard of that. Alex intervened to protect Tylee. Alex and Charles got in a struggle and fell. Tylee was on the ground and lifted up by me to get outside to safety and to JJ, who was still in a running car. Charles prevailed with the bat and came towards me as I ran into the kitchen. He was chasing me. Alex got his gun and I ran out to the children, and Alex shot Charles in self-defense. Just a reminder, if you listened to that crash course I did, she said she was in the kitchen and heard the shooting, and afterwards went and stood right by Alex as they looked at Charles in silence because they were both in shock. We ran out of the house without shoes. JJ was still in the front seat with Tylee, struggling to keep him inside the car. We got in the rental car and drove away. I drove towards JJ's school. At this point, Lori asks for a tissue and says, I took JJ to Burger King as Charles promised he would. The school wasn't open and we ran out without any shoes, so we stopped and bought flip-flops to take JJ inside the school. We returned directly to the residence and talked to the Chandler PD. They told us Charles was dead. Then we were driven to the Chandler Police Department. We were all interrogated, and Tylee and I were introduced to a victim's advocate and later driven back to the residence. Chandler PD told us to pick up JJ and come back. We went to Alex's to attend to the wound on the back of his head. Alex was contacted by the Chandler PD to walk them through the events there at the house. The evidence will show Alex went inside with Detective Moffat, and me and Tylee were with Detective Inklin. She asked if we had Charles's cell phone. We gave it to law enforcement, and Tylee gave the detective the passcode to Charles's phone. We went to get JJ. All police, EMS, and first responders were gone, and only Alex was there when we got back. I told Chandler PD the next day Charles's stuff was still at the hotel and asked what we should do next. They said wait 3 weeks, and the last thing I heard from the Chandler PD was they treated this as a self-defense. There's an objection that's sustained. Lori said, I received a grand jury notice. 5 months later, Alex died from a blood clot in his lung. Objection sustained. I am the only one being charged with this crime. Objection sustained. Married couples have life insurance and family tragedies happen. And that was the end of her openings. The first witness up was a Chandler Police Department patrol officer at the time. His first name is Irwin, last name Wurzbicki. Sorry if I butchered that. He responded to the scene and had body camera rolling. Alex came out the front door and the witness was giving him commands. He said Alex's demeanor was nonchalant and compliant. At this point, there were 2 officers on scene. The witness decided to clear the house. We see his body cam showing no furniture, just an empty room, and we see Charles laying on his back with his hands down to his side. He briefly checks to be sure there is no pulse, and there's not. Charles had 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, and there was also blood pooling up in the neck area. He found a firearm in the room Alex was staying in, and the fire department came in to render aid after the house was cleared. They were staged just down the road until the house was cleared. By the time the house was cleared, there were other officers there. On cross, Lori asked, "You said Alex exiting the house was nonchalant." The witness said, "I don't know if I said that. He was calm and unbothered." Lori says, "But you said nonchalant. Does everyone act the same in stressful situations? Are you trained to know what to look for regarding that?" The witness says no. Lori, you put your hand on his neck to check for a pulse. Did you perform CPR? No. If I'd started pumping his chest, it would have spewed blood out at a rapid pace. Lori says, so when the 911 dispatcher was telling my brother to give CPR, it would have been the same? Yes. She asked if he has any crime scene experience, and the officer says, just my 20 years as an officer. You didn't do CPR, but the fire department did? Yes. Is that normal protocol? The witness says, I don't know what their protocol is. She asked how long he was at the residence, but he doesn't know a time. Lori said, was it a while? And the witness said, I don't know. It was a long time ago. She asked, did you see me arrive on scene? The witness says, yes. Lori asked, when they did CPR, did they open his shirt? The witness says, I don't know. Lori says, but when you walked by, his shirt was open and there was an objection. How many times have you discussed this case with Detective Duncan? The witness says, maybe 5, just in passing. When did you write your report? The witness said, at the end of my shift. On redirect, they have the witness reiterate he didn't really touch anything at the crime scene other than checking for that pulse, clearing the residence, looking for a phone or a wallet. The next witness, Robert Krautheim, he's with the Chandler PD. He was also dispatched after Charles was shot. He wore a body cam. He said Alex was calm, no sweating. He did see that injury on the back of Alex's head, one laceration, and he notes Alex was rubbing the back of his head with a paper towel. Alex did not ask for any medical treatment. It was offered to him, but overall, he did not seem to be hurt. The witness saw Lori and Tylee come on scene and spoke to them. He said Lori's demeanor was calm, nonchalant, matter of fact, as I'm talking to you now. Lori walked up to the witness there on scene and he told her to go across the street. Lori never asked about Alex's condition and never asked why there were so many first responder vehicles there. They show the body cam footage as he's pulling in. It's a gated community. We see those fire trucks staged down the road while the residence is being cleared, and then we see the witness talking to Alex. The prosecution points out Alex has those sunglasses on the top of his head, and also he is touching the back of his head. He rubs it. Alex refused medical attention. They show when Lori and Tylee show up there on scene, and the officer directs Lori to stay away from Alex. He was the one that transported Alex to the police station and said Alex was calm during transport. We talked about this on the crash course where they talked about how hot it was in Phoenix. Y'all, I can vouch for that today, as well as this officer wearing Kevlar in the heat. On cross, Lori said, you said Alex was calm when he exited the house, and you were told Alex composed himself when he called 911. Was the scene chaotic? The witness said no. Lori asked the witness, were you calm? Yes. Lori asks, when I arrived at the scene, was it calm? Yes. She asked about Alex's wound. Was it bleeding a little and a small knot? Yes. Would you not call it a goose egg? The witness is like tomato, tomato. How many times did you ask Alex if he needed medical treatment? The witness said 3 times. Lori said EMS could have easily checked him out, but nobody did. The witness said no. The witness said Alex did not seem disoriented or hurt. Lori asked, what's your definition of nonchalant? The witness said no emotion, not afraid. Lori asks if he knows how hot it was that day. The witness said it was hot, and Lori repeats it and kind of laughs and says it was hot. She asks, when he briefed another officer on scene, what did he say? The witness said, I told him what Alex told me. Lori mentions the body cam and asks, did you put the phone in an evidence bag? The witness said he doesn't think so. She mentions she did not see that in his report. There's an objection, and Lori is told to ask questions and not share her observations. She asked who rode to the police station, and the witness said just me and Alex. Once at the Chandler Police Department, was he cooperative? Yes. Is it possible Alex could have been in shock? There is an objection that's sustained. How long was Alex's cut bleeding? The witness said, I don't know. I wasn't standing behind him. This witness did not go inside the house at any point. Lori says Alex's niece grabbed the bat. There's an objection for hearsay. Did Alex tell you he got hit in the head? Again, objection sustained. The judge says you can't ask what Alex said. Lori asked, did you observe this bump on his head, but you don't know how he got it? The witness said, no, that's not correct. The witness said he was told how he got it, which is different from me knowing how he got it. Lori says, did you observe the next door neighbor in her nightgown to come speak with me and other people that came outside? The witness says, yes. She said people were coming up and asking her what happened. She asked the witness what he said when he briefed the detective. There is an objection that's sustained, and Lori asks if the witness's statements are hearsay, and the judge says yes, unless there is an exception. Lori, did you brief them before you headed to the police station, and who was there? The witness said, Detective Moffat, Cassie, and my sergeant. Lori asked, how long before you left to go to the police station did you brief the other officer? And the witness said, maybe 10 minutes. And then she asked, how long were you speaking to him? And the witness said, under a minute. Lori says, under a minute for the briefing? The witness says, yes. Did you meet with the prosecutor to go over your testimony? The witness says, yes. She asked when. It was 2 weeks ago. She wants to know, how long did that last? He said an hour. Did you review your report before you came today? Yes. Was it your duty to look for evidence? The witness said just scene management and making sure that resources were en route. Lori asked, what is scene management? The witness said, once we knew there wasn't a threat, I instructed an officer to put up crime scene tape, to get a supervisor en route, and to keep people from coming up to the scene. Lori kind of laughs and says, how many people came to the scene? The witness said, I don't know, but one man was walking towards me and I directed him to turn around. Lori asked if the witness had any conversations with his supervisor prior to when his supervisor arrived. Yes. Lori asked when, and the witness said some point between my arrival and leaving. How long was it to transport from the house to the Chandler PD? The witness said it's about 8 to 10 miles, and it took maybe 10 to 15 minutes. She asked, where did you enter into the police station? The witness doesn't know. There's multiple ways to enter. Alex was not handcuffed. He was not shackled. And then he was put into an interrogation room. Did your supervisor come to the police department as well? The witness said he may have, but I don't know. Didn't see him. The state, you were asked if you were nonchalant and calm after you were asked about Alex's demeanor. Had you just shot someone? The witness says no. The state, not fair to compare you to the shooter, and the witness says that's correct. The state asks if Alex had his hand to his head when he first came out. No. When he first sat on the curb, did you notice an injury? No. Did you see Alex touch or rub his head? Yes. The witness said that the only thing he used to rub his head or touch his head was a paper towel. And the state asked, was that soaked in blood? No. And the last witness of the day is Scott Chowden. He is a firefighter and actually testified at Lori's Idaho trial. He said Charles had been wearing a shirt that had been absorbing the blood that was coming from his injuries. His first impression of seeing Charles, there were no signs of life. The state, you were told someone did CPR prior to your arrival? Yes. They show a photo of 3 people working on Charles, and then there is an officer documenting as they're doing so. He explains there wasn't a depression that's normally in the chest if someone had done CPR. He also said you hear cracks when doing CPR. It's like cracking knuckles, but worse. This witness mainly just testified about the fact that clearly CPR was not done before he got there. When they rolled Charles over, one worker commented there were 2 wounds on Charles's back. He only noticed the depression in Charles's chest after the witness did CPR. It wasn't there before, which, as we know, Alex did not do CPR. The witness points out there was changes in the skin color on Charles's back, that lividity. I looked up on some medical sites. It takes about 30 minutes for that to start setting in. So again, it goes to show you 911 wasn't called when Alex said it was. So that was it. I mean, look, in the grand scheme of things, Lori didn't do a super terrible job today, But this is opening statements. This is first responders, police. She really doesn't know. I really think that it's going to be very different when she is interviewing people that she knows and has known for years. So that's it for today. I will be live streaming again tomorrow. So come watch live with us. I apologize. That stream kicked off a little early today. Not sure what happened here at the Airbnb with the Wi-Fi. We got it back up as soon as we could, but back tomorrow. I also will be doing a lunchtime live with Law and Crime Network. So just stay tuned to the YouTube channel when we go to lunch break. There is a 30-minute delay. So again, should have the feed going around 11 a.m., but come early, chat with everybody. That is it for today. Hope you have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.